Coaches, welcome back. Super excited to have a great guest for you tonight here. A guest that I hope gets more notoriety for all the great things that she's done after meeting and listening to her tonight. One of the great minds in college football at any level, and also one of the great minds at professional football here. She's had a great career at a variety of different stops, and we're so excited to learn from her tonight. Coach Ashley Cornwell. Coach, welcome to our podcast, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your career in coaching.
Sure. You were way too nice with that introduction. Way too nice. But thank you for having me on. Um, Actually, I haven't been around probably quite a few spots, but I got my own football just like anybody else. I was playing. I actually started with flag football, which is pretty cool. Got into tackle when I was younger. And then in high school, I got into coaching. So I started coaching at the youth football level. And then by the time I graduated high school, I had applied for a few different jobs at the University of Wisconsin, and I lucked out. I got my foot in the door through recruiting and video, and then they let me stay on as a student assistant coach. And then that's where I started. After that, I worked with the NFL's International Player Pathway Program, coached the offensive line there in 2023. I'm actually coaching there again right now as we speak. I also was the offensive line coach at Oberlin. I've had two internships, one with the Tennessee Titans, one with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's kind of a long list. And then I actually do have a new spot. I just can't announce it yet. But I'll be going back to a Division I school to help out. So I'm really excited with that.
That's fantastic. Just can you tell us a little bit about the program? You know, you'd mentioned a little bit about it, but I'm not sure if our viewers at home really know about that internship program that you've been a part of.
The IPP or the Bill Walsh?
Let's go both.
Okay, because they're both really cool. So the Bill Walsh, those can vary based on like the clubs that you go to. So that's with one of 32 NFL teams. I've had like kind of a variety of experiences. Like one was a short one because I was still working at Wisconsin. And then the one that I just did with the Buccaneers was 4 months. So it was pretty immersive. Um, and really what they do is I had to interview for both of mine. Some of them it's, if you know somebody, they can help you get it. And then you just come in, you can shadow depending on the club. I was lucky enough that I was coaching rookies. I got the opportunity to run part of the meeting as well. I was helping out just like a QC or an offensive assistant. So that was really immersive and that was cool. What I love talking about is the NFL International Player Pathway Program. That's something that it was the coolest thing ever, and I didn't know how cool it was because I turned them down when they first offered me the job in 2023, which they never let me forget. But that's where we work with players who have actually had either never played football before or they've only played overseas, and we try to help give them a shot at getting with an NFL team. So just like any senior in college who's going to go train within the next few months for their Pro Bowls, or excuse me, with their pro days and their combines, we're kind of like trainers for the international guys. So we help give them an opportunity. We catch them up to speed, and then they can earn a spot with an NFL team if there's a team that wants to take them.
That's fantastic. And coach, I think it's interesting just to hear kind of the journey that you've taken to get there. Just all the things that you have to go through in order to make these connections happen. And obviously
Yeah.
you've probably had great mentors, learned a lot of information about a variety of different topics. And one of the things that drew me to you is kind of what you did at the AFCA this past year. So one of the topics that you covered at the AFCA clinic was on pass protection and the different fundamentals and things that go along with that. So with that in mind, what are some of the things, whether it be at your stops at Oberlin or whether it be stops in the NFL, what are some of those day one pass protection fundamentals that you really emphasize in your coaching?
Yeah. The biggest thing with me, and you probably heard me talk about it, the AFCA, it's establishing landmarks and then working the feet day one. I'm not worried about the hands day one because I need to get guys right with the feet. Because depending if you're working right with centers or in guards, their responsibility with the pocket is a lot different than a tackles. So I always just try to go over the fundamentals of the feet. How do we move the feet? How do we keep the feet moving? And then you start working in the hands. But anytime I have a drill or I introduce a new drill, we always do it with no hands first because I want them to just get used to moving your feet, understanding where your feet need to be. I always tell my guys, right, and this is common knowledge, centers and guards, you're responsible for the depth of the pocket, tackles, you're responsible for the width of the pocket. So you always want to emphasize feet day one and just what you're looking for out of the feet. And the biggest thing is you got to keep your feet moving the entire play because, and you heard me say at the convention too, if your hands for some reason get messed up, if your feet can keep your body in between the pass rusher and the quarterback, you're doing your job. You're most likely going to get a plus. Nobody should hurt that guy. But yeah, that's some of the stuff that I focus on.
Great. Now, along with that, you're teaching the feet, really to be kind of separate then from your hands. What are some of those drills that you would walk into to help maybe an aspiring high school offensive coach, O-line coach, a young coach, maybe at the collegiate level? What are some of those drills? What do they look like in helping them out develop those feet and hands separate?
They're super fundamental, and I can probably share my screen if you want, and we
Yeah.
can look at some of it. So I'll do that right now real quick. And
Yep.
then I will go. So this is my full pass tape. Excuse the mess. I've been working on a bunch of different things right now. But we have what's called, I'm gonna see if I can find it real quick, call it 1 set, 2 set, 3 set. And this is just good fundamentals day one, right? When you set up stuff. All we're working on is just like that first movement and where's my landmark when I move. And here, don't have them punch, don't have them do much. This is just like an introductory drill. So what we mean by 1 set, 2 set, 3 set, and forgive me, I should explain that. So 3 set means I'm on your outside shoulder. 2 set means I'm head up. 1 set means I'm inside. And what we're doing with this is we're just teaching guys, okay, when you have a guy lined up in your 3, right? Let's say he stays in that 3, I just got to kick, right? And I always tell my guys, your outside foot should be split in the middle of that defensive lineman because we don't want to teach guys to overset. We also don't want them to underset either because then you're not going to be in position to strike. So right here, we're just practicing that. Roy's just going through. He's just taking that first kick, putting him in line with that 3 set. Here comes Marlon. And then Hector gives him one last look. That's just a 3 set look. You can do it a few different ways. So here we're still working 3 sets. Think that then we move to head up. We move to a head up 2 set. And all we do there is we just kind of move back a little bit and flash our hands, right? Because we're just assuming bull rush. Bull rush with a 2 set. Just move back, flash my hands. They're already head up with me. We don't need to really go anywhere. If we do go anywhere, go slightly inside. And then 1 set, obviously we're posting. We're trying to regain back that inside leverage because inside is the fastest way to the quarterback. And then in this particular 1 set, 2 set, 3 set, I like 1 set, 2 set, 3 set because you can build off of it. We can add in med balls to punch. We can add in kick slides. But once we go 3 set, 2 set, 1 set, what we have the guys do, particularly in this drill, is they just kick. They come back and post, and then we have them run out and finish. So Roy's got to do a better job. Hector's got to do a better job at finishing. But you can do a lot of things with 1 set, 2 set, 3 set. And then here, just with the med ball, this will be the last one I show, and then we can just keep talking about other things, right? But 3 set right here sets out punches. Get the slime back up, sets out punch in a 2 set, posts in, punches, kicks, comes back. And it's important when you teach that punch, right? And I'm a big independent hands punch. When we introduce the punch with the med balls and with 1 set, 2 set, 3 set, all we're focused on is making contact in front of our body, like so. We don't want our hands too high. We don't want our hands too low because we're not going to make great contact. That's not going to be a strong enough punch. We want it straight in front of us with our thumbs up, and we want to get full extension and send that med ball right back to our partner, right back to his chest. So that's just one drill that I focus on day one when it comes to pass. And then if you want one more,
Yeah.
I call this one, I hope I have it in here. If I don't, it's going to be a shame. Call it mirror dodge. Oh, here we go. In mirror dodge, you can do a few different ways. So a lot of these drills, you'll notice too, these sets aren't as vertical as what tackles need, and that's okay. Because we're starting with the basics, we're just starting with the fundamentals. I would obviously recommend as you progress, and if you do have the luxury of having an assistant with you, or you are the assistant, right? Either the lead coach or you should be taking the tackles to go work on more vertical sets. And we can get into that if we have enough time. But this is just the fundamentals. So here you'll see, well, I'll explain the drill first, forgive me. We have the line right here. So we do 5-yard increments, and I'm sure people have seen variations of this. This is really good for centers and for guards to do. as the season goes. So let's just pretend we have little cones right here. I don't know if you see my mouse.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Right here, and we have a cone right here. And what we tell the player is all this land behind those cones, that's where the quarterback lives. And you're the bouncer. Nobody gets in the quarterback's house. So your goal is to move back and forth. It's to mirror whoever the defender is, or we call him the rabbit. So wherever the rabbit goes, you want to stay in front of the rabbit. And if the rabbit can cross the line or put a toe across that line, we always say, oh, it's a point for the rabbit. And you don't want to do that. You want to stay in front of him. So what we're working on here is just mirroring, moving our feet, keeping them moving, right? Because we all know you're going to get plenty of straight rushes. You're going to get plenty of things that aren't straight rushes. So we want to just help drill guys in working on reacting and mirroring a guy. You can also have him start in a left or right-handed stance. Ideally, that's what I like them to do because I like them to work the post or just more of a lateral set, not as vertical of a set, obviously. So we always start with the hands behind the back. Just focus on the hands, understand what you're doing. We're trying to mirror this rabbit. We're trying to stay in front of him. Here's Chew going about it, right? We got the cone set up. And he crossed his own line. That's not good. So we always tell our guys, try to stay in front of that line. We're just working on that mirroring. We're just working on moving our feet and mirroring. That's all we're doing. But overall, he does a good job positionally, right? Keeping his body in between the defender and the imaginary quarterback. Let's see if I can find one with hands. Here we go, Hector. So here we just add in the hands. They can have more of a punch. We're not going too hard on this one, but just mirroring, keeping our hands up. We had more aggressive drills. I'll end it on this one. And if we want to get more into it, we can. You can also start with, instead of putting a body there right away, start with the tennis ball first. So just have them understanding going cone to cone and have them catch with two hands in front of their chest, because you never want to just punch and just leave one hand on there. Even though I teach independent hands, it's a 1-2. It's not just one hand on a guy. So we just teach a tennis ball, getting them to move their feet. You want to throw the ball to the cone so the guys are stretched out. And when you coach the rabbit, tell the rabbit not to do short movements, but to do longer movements to make sure that the feet are moving. But those are some of the drills that we start out with day one, or that I like to start out with day one when I'm just talking about feet with pass sets.
Yeah, that's good. So the question I have is, especially at maybe the younger levels that I maybe coaching at the high school level or the collegiate level, for maybe an offensive lineman that's shooting hands too soon or maybe shooting hands too wide, what are some of the adjustments, whether it be to a drill or just things that you do in practice that'll help teach the kind of the proper leverage with your hands, but also how to keep like elbows tight and things like that?
Yeah, I know some players have had to use cuffs before. I've always had the luxury where I haven't quite had that issue. I do know cuffs help out because I did have some players where they're shooting like this. I call it like giving a bear hug, and you don't want that. I always tell them, even when they're carrying their hands in front of their chest, I'm always like, kind of like squeeze your elbows in a bit. Like try to squeeze them in a bit, not too much, but just always be mindful of like, okay, my elbows are tight, have tight elbows. But I do know like cuffs help out with that to start. And I know some coaches even use that in the run game. So if you have the option to get cuffs so their hands can't go wide, that will help them from coming out like this. And then, sorry, the other one was just not reaching, right?
Yeah,
Not
shooting
trying to
hands too
punch
soon.
early. The one drill that's coming to mind, and you might even have a better one than I do, and I'd love to hear it. It's just down the line, and we did this the other day. So it's where, again, it's a 5-yard increment. I could probably find the tape for that too, but we just have them where you're behind the line, right, in the left or right-handed stance, and we have a guy that moves back and forth in front of you, and I can tell if you're leaning based on how we space out the rabbit, because sometimes we'll have him kind of come away from you. We'll have him flash his chest. We'll have him like showing his shoulders. So there's a variety of things that we do, but I can tell when a guy is leaning, and then we just encourage him to sit back, to feel that sit back and to sink. And then I just coach like, oh, you just leaned right there, and kind of just work it from that. The one coaching point I have technically that I try to teach, which I think helps out with leaning, is to pinch your shoulder blades. So if you do that with me, you'll kind of feel that you're not hunched forward, which is kind of where the problem starts. Your weight should be on your insteps, but if I pinch my shoulder blades, it sits me back. I have better posture, and a little bit more weight goes to my rear, which helps me if I'm leaning, and that also gets my hands up in front of my chest. But I'd be curious to hear like if you have something specific that you've done with that, because those are the two things that came to my mind.
Yeah, it's not something that I have a ton of experience on in terms of helping our young linemen out and getting them in the right position. Obviously, every coach has a difference, so I appreciate you giving kind of your insight on it. I think that's a good drill and good teaching points there. The other thing that comes to mind too, when we're looking at offensive line development, if I'm teaching a young tackle, one of the things I like to focus on is kind of not only just give them a aiming point in terms of like a landmark for their drops and their feet, but also make a landmark for their eyes. What are some things that they are focusing on with their eyes as they are dealing with the oncoming rush? Are there anything that you teach them in terms of landmarks or things to focus on their eyes that might help identify for them the type of technique they need to use?
Yeah, or even to like just helping them not fight on the moves that they're seeing is probably pretty similar to what you're teaching as well. I've been in systems where we teach center of the chest because that helps you, right, when they're kind of shaking their shoulders, like they do that to get you to stop your feet and to kind of go, oh shit. Or you can kind of tell too, right, if a guy's really going to commit to crossing your face, well, that center of the chest is going to be moving. You don't want to focus on anything on the exterior because I can do whatever with my head. I can do whatever with my hands, right? But if I focus on the chest or the hip, whatever it may be, like that's not going to lie to me. I know landmark wise, when I teach independent hands, you always are going to shoot first with the hand closest. Like if he's inside of me, it's going to be my inside hand. If he's outside of me, it's going to be my outside hand. But I do try to teach guys to try to aim to like the farthest um number, right, of the player that they're seeing. So if I'm a tackle and I'm against a 5 technique, and I'm a left tackle, I'm against a 5 technique, it's going to be his right shoulder, but from my view, it'd be his left shoulder that I'm striking with if he stays outside of me. If he crosses my face or he for some reason is aligned inside of me, let's say we have a full slide, we're going to the right, got a 4-eye or something like that, and I'm posting in, I want to shoot and hit that right number, my right, his left, right? So I just try to teach those landmarks to help them, one, not get tripped up on all the fancy moves they can see, but then two, have a solid place to put their hands when they punch.
How about like what are some of your advice and techniques that you teach your players to handle things like a bull rush?
Yeah, so bull rushes are interesting, and I did touch upon that a little bit at the convention, just like my progression and everything with that. We are kind of getting to where it's like the long arm, where we're pretending that we're going around, and then all of a sudden, boom, we shoot into you, like just things like that. The biggest thing that's going to help you with the bull rush is to make sure that you have your hands in front of your chest. Because if I give them my chest, that's free real estate. If I have my hands in front, I got some sort of chance where they're not going to lock onto my chest, they hit a hand or whatnot. If they do, for some reason, we lose the rep. The biggest thing that I try to teach my guys is to either get my hands back inside. But if I'm a guy where my hands aren't too long, like what do I do? You know what I mean? Have you been in that situation before? Guys with short arms. I'm sorry. There's plenty of O-linemen with short arms. I've been kind of playing around with it a bit, like just teaching them to knock the hands off and to get them comfortable with doing a quick knock off and refit. I'd be curious to hear like how you teach that as well, but that's kind of been my solution. Like if your hands are long enough to where I can just refit them inside and kind of push them out and lock them out and anchor, that's great. Some guys, if your hands are too short, like you got to figure out a way to knock his hands off and to refit on that rep.
Is there anything you talk about with like the feet, like when you're, you know, aside from the hands, is there anything with the feet that you tell them to do, like, lower your center of gravity, get both feet rooted into the ground? What are some of the things foot wise that you would try to use to combat the bull rush?
Right. Like, so if we're getting pushed back, I tell my guys to kind of sit, but what happens a lot is you'll see like their toes will kind of go at a 45-degree angle, and they really emphasize putting weight on their insteps to kind of brace and the lockout. You got to be careful that you don't put too much weight forward, because if I'm the D lineman, I'm going to feel that. And if I kind of feel you pushing a little bit too much into me, even though I am bull rushing you, I have seen guys where they kind of just readjust, bring you forward, and then finish the play. But I think the biggest thing that you have to do is you do have to lower your center of gravity. You have to kind of get up underneath him because that's going to help you get leverage. And once you get up underneath him, hopefully you can get to the point where you can kind of push him up a little bit and you help like prevent him from continuing to gain momentum on you. But I do tell my guys, right, anchor more on those insteps. And then you also heard me talk about it at convention, right? I'd like to teach them to hop back as to slow it down because there's some guys where it's like you ain't gonna stop them, but you can slow them down. And then there's some guys that I have for some reason they're comfortable just walking it back, and that's okay too. So I kind of give them an option, but the biggest thing is to keep weight on that insteps, to get your hands back inside, to maintain extension. You don't want him in your grill because it's going to be harder for you to control him. You want to maintain extension with your hands and then to just sit, walk it back or hop it back.
And the last one we'll talk about, then we'll kind of switch over to some protection schemes is, you see this becoming a little bit more prevalent in certain levels, but you have these very special athletes that just use speed. They can just use, alignment, and they're coming from all different areas, whether it be as an outside backer or just a stand-up defensive end. What would you tell an offensive tackle, or what are some things you would teach an offensive tackle in terms of them developing their game plan of how are you going to really defend a guy who's going to really try to beat you with speed?
Right. That's kind of like where you heard me talk about a little bit too, like the hip toss, but then just when we're studying alignments of guys, like if he gets out super wide, understanding how that affects my set. If he's like a tighter 5, I call him a wide 1. So if they're not really like a tight 5, but they're out a little bit wider, we call him a wide 1. And then that affects the set. And what I don't want happening to my guys is them oversetting or coming out just a little bit too much. And then we have too much space in between him and the guard. So that's where we work more of a vertical set. And we really got to be conscious, right? We already have more vertical of sets than guards and centers, but we really work that vertical set just to make sure that we keep that width and we don't kind of get lost out there. We are going to be on an island, but we don't want to get too far away from our help. And then with that, again, it's just maintaining the inside half leverage that we make when we have our outside leg split his midline. And then if they're really going to be running the hump, we talked about this at the AFCA convention as well. It's like, where's that point of no return to then where do I do a hip toss or a hip check? And I always got to be ready for that spin back. But if they're committed to beating me with speed, I got to time it up. I don't want to overset, but I also don't want to turn my hips too quick either because I'm giving the inside. I wait, shoot my punch. I feel it out. As soon as he gets to that, what I call the point of no return, where he's pretty much even with me, that's when I start turning with him, put my hand on that hip to feel, just to make sure if he spins back, I can feel it. And if not, I use that hand on that hip to just keep him going on by right by the quarterback. Hopefully I'm detailing this enough because I know I don't have film for some of this. So I'm trying to like verbally talk through it. And if you put this on YouTube, you're going to be seeing me like the top part of me like trying to show this. You're like, Ash, where are your hands? I apologize, y'all. I'm doing my best, but
No, that's really good. No, I think that's good information in terms of, I think a lot of the people who are watching this can visualize that and understand what you're referring to. So no worries there. Coach, the next thing let's kind of dive into here is, obviously you've been at a lot of different levels. So you've seen a variety of different ways that, teams are picking up different types of stunts and blitzes. And, whereas in maybe in the lower levels, teams might carry one or two types of protection. So what are some of the more innovative, or what are some of the more progressive things that you're seeing in the pass protection world from a scheme standpoint that have really been successful for you?
Well, the biggest thing, like with some of these NFL defenses, I wish I can get into like the specifics and pull up playbook drawings, but I gotta honor that. But one thing I can say is like how crazy some of these blitzes can be and how well these defensive coordinators are at disguising of where the blitz is gonna come. And I remember I was in one training camp and one of the coaches was like, screw it. There's no man anymore. Everything's a sort. He's like, you were going to be either sorting on the play side or you're sorting on the back side. He's like, I don't care. You're just sorting. He's like, get the man out of your head, because he was just like beside himself. He was like, crap, I don't know. But the biggest thing that I'm seeing though is kind of like an added responsibility. Like there was, in the half slide, half man, right? The running back would have somebody. But then when we start getting into like those 5-man protections, or we're getting into certain matchups where we're trying to make sure that, in these sort protections, the one risk that you have is you might have it end up where depending on the game, that there's a running back on an end, which is not ideal. But there's been a lot more of sort, and not so much half man, half slide at the higher level because of everything being disguised, which I do like to an extent. And I also like that it puts responsibility on the quarterback. If we do start getting, one too many, offensive coordinators are getting a lot better with, putting in hot routes and making sure that that stuff's taken care of. But that's like one thing that I've seen, and one thing that I actually do like with, picking up blitzes is just adjusting and putting, I would say, more on like the left tackle's plate, the right tackle's plate. You're seeing more dual reads, and that's pretty cool as well. But yeah, that's the one thing, even at Wisconsin, credit to Jim Leonard. Like, he was so good at disguising where his blitzes were coming from. And that was really cool to learn, and to also just watch coaches figure out, how are we going to deal with that. And then the
No,
lower levels,
no, go
sorry,
ahead.
real quick. Yeah, I remember I was playing around. We pretty much saw the same defense every game, but it was pretty cool to see how teams would watch tape and then they would adjust. Like, I kind of already knew where they were going to go and like what they were going to do, but I could see, the progression, right? Everyone's pretty much running a 3-4 in the NCAC. And I could see the progression from each school as they're like, well, they tried this blitz. Let's try this one. Let's try this twist, right? And I started going more to of like, you got to sort it. We got sort rules. Everything's a sort now. There wasn't a whole lot of man, especially with, the splits that we had and then the looks that we were seeing. We had to do sort, and we were able to pick up a lot of stuff, and that was fun.
Well, Coach, one of the things I want to kind of look at here, and luckily you have it drawn up here for us, but some people at home might not be familiar with. Okay, we talked a little bit of sort. Okay, when you're talking about, well, what is sort protection? Let's talk about it within a 6-man protection, kind of as you have drawn up here. If you can give the viewers at home just an idea of what does it mean by sort protection?
Right. So sort is, it's it's similar to a zone, similar to an area. Not going to get too complex, but you have a certain number of guys that are responsible for X amount of guys responsible for about, Y number of guys. And how I kind of teach it, it can be like a few different ways, but let's say we have like a 4-man slide going to the right. Sorry, I'm like drawing this up, right? And some of the schemes that I've seen, right, you'll assume just based on normal protections that it's these 4 responsible for these 4. I've also had schemes where they add in a DB if he gets too close to that sort side. And what that means is these 4 linemen right here are going to either sort these 4 or these 5 players based on how they blitz once the ball is snapped. And all that means is based on like what gap they come through or what they're responsible for, that's who they're going to pick up. So it's not a man scheme, right? Where you'd have a certain man that you're responsible for. A sort is we're just sorting through whatever players come up based on our rules. And we got to take care of them, not as they lined up, but as they wind up once the ball is snapped. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And then sometimes too, right, with a lot of sort protections, right, the backside's also in a sort. If this was just a 5-man pro, this tackle could be, in a dual read. This picture, forgive me, it's a little bit messed up. Let's say we had just an extra defender in here with a 6-man pro. Sometimes you can get like a 2 for 3 on the backside, right? And then that means the tackle and the running back are working together to sort the most dangerous players that are coming through the play. So as mentioned before, I'm going to go back to this slide side right here, the slide to the right, because it's just a little bit easier to visualize. We have 4 bodies. Let's say we add this DB into the sort versus we're responsible for 5, because there's some protections where they're like, hey, we also want you to take care of this DB. I've seen that too. Let's say if we want to get the running back out on a route, we're trying to help with the quarterback a little bit, or we just know that, hey, they're not really going to bring more than 1 from each side. They're going to exchange it between the linebacker and the DB. What it means is, based on how they wind up, we just got to take those 4 that are most dangerous, the 4 that are inside. So if the backer and the DB come, we got to take the 4 that are most inside, and that's sometimes where we get that quarterback hot. If the backer drops and the DB comes, we're responsible for that DB. I've also been in a system. Have you heard of double bump before?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So sometimes they'll put one of the linemen, he's going to be responsible for 2 guys at a time. The system I was in, it was always a guard that was helping out. So he might, hit the nose and hit the backer if the backer was blitzing. And that's what we call the double bump. So when you think about a sort, right, just think about it's X amount of guys responsible for Y amount of guys. And we got to block them, not as they lined up, but as they wind up once the ball is snapped. And we're always going to be working inside and out. Hopefully I've taught that.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
that was
still
perfect.
makes sense. Yeah, I'm trying to keep it simple because there's so many examples that you can get, so many names, but just understanding like a sort is we're just sorting out a mess, sorting out a mess. And that helps us pick up blitzes. Because like I said, these defensive coordinators, these defensive coaches are getting better at disguising their blitzes, like where they're coming from. You can kind of pick up on the tendencies, but the goal of that is just to make sure that we take care of the pocket and we protect inside out.
Good. So let's kind of, step away from the sort conversation here a little bit and talk more about like some of the different trends in the industry that you're seeing here in terms of maybe from a schematic or maybe even a blitz standpoint. What are some of the more common things that you're seeing maybe at the levels that you're coaching at? I mean, we can, I'm starting even to see in the high school level, that double A gap blitz, which was all, the rage with Zimmer. That's pretty common now at the high school level, but, the mug pressure and that type of stuff still isn't all that common at some of the areas that I'm coaching in currently. But what are some of the trends that you're seeing that are really kind of common that are presenting a lot of problems for the modern day offensive line?
Yeah, so you're talking about the double mug look. I would say just now having backers lined up, especially like right in third downs and obvious pass situations where we're going to get a blitz. You're starting to see these coordinators, it's not just a double mug. Now they're kind of putting backers maybe to the outside, but then bringing them all the way back in to that A gap. So they're still attacking the A gaps, but they're just getting creative about where and who am I having do that. I think the Steelers and the Cowboys are going to be some good examples if you have film to watch. Maybe if I can hop on this podcast again, I can have something like that dialed up and we can watch it because I do have access to some of that film. But what they do is they're just getting a little bit more creative about putting, the player that is going to rush the A gap. They don't put him there, right? Or they kind of put him somewhere where you're like, he probably won't come. And then they're getting more creative where they're having movement outside from the interior guys and then bringing in that exterior to attack that A gap. They're just getting a little bit more creative with it. So that's kind of what I'm seeing. We call it like Abby looks in the NFL. You'll hear that term a lot as well. But I was just watching film of the Seahawks this year with one of my players, literally before I hopped on this podcast. And they were playing the Eagles, and we saw like a ton of the double mug looks, and what we call coffee houses, where they try to trick you, especially when you're in empty formation. I'll just talk a little bit about this, right? The defensive coordinator's mind. When I was on defense for a year, one of my jobs was to find tendencies. And that was also with where's the slide going? Where's the man side at? And then how can we expose that? So what I was trying to point out to one of our players is they were in an obvious, right? It's empty. This is a pass formation. It's a 3-by-2, but it's open. So that means that there's no running back tight to the line. There's no tight end tight to the line. So it's pretty much open. It's obvious 5-man situation. And then what's going to happen with that when we get in that situation? So obvious 5-man protection, right? But what they did was they put 6 guys in front of us, and knowing that they're either going to get a full slide, they might get a half slide, they might get a sort to one side, a sort to the other. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to make us, guess on where we should put 3-on-3 and 2-on-3, right? And take advantage of that. So what I told them was what the defensive coordinator probably had one of the QCs or assistants do was just to take a look at tendencies. Because if they slide, to the field a lot, well, then I'm probably only going to bring, out of 6 against 5 guys, I might only bring 2 to that slide side and 3 to that man side, knowing that I'm going to have 3 versus 2 on the backside, and I'm going to hit on that backside versus a 2 versus 3. I hope that makes sense, right? Just finding out ways where I can outnumber guys based on this the half slide, the half man. And that's also where you're getting a lot of these sorts coming in now, because we're trying to put in rules to take care of that. Yeah, hopefully I described that well enough.
Yeah, I thought you did a great job of explaining it. I guess the last thing that I would really, ask you here to be respectful of your time and try to, bring a close to this interview, which again, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've learned a lot about just the different nuances of pass protection that I hope a lot of other people are taking as well. And, if we're fortunate enough to cross paths again, that'd be great to continue this conversation. But I just want to dive in just to a second here.
Uh-huh.
Your run game stuff here. Like
Yeah.
if you are, let's just say, Ashley's building her own run game and you're saying, this is what I'm most knowledgeable in. This is the stuff that I'd want to hang my hat on when I got all personnel that I wanted. What's your run scheme of choice and why?
Oh man, I have so many favorite run schemes. My top two are outside zone and gap scheme. But at the end of the day, if you're like Ash, you only get one scheme to run. I'm picking gap, and hear me out. I don't know who my my O lineman might be all the time, right? I might not be working with the most athletic O lineman, and I've been very fortunate, and I love it when I have O linemen who can move and who can hustle, right? Those are great zone guys. But if I have undersized guys or maybe guys where it's like can't move as quick, gap scheme is awesome because you take advantage of natural leverage that you have with your players in order to make plays. And I know you're like, okay, well, pulls, they got to move in space. Zone's a little different with that movement, but I love gap scheme and two back power. I love power, but I'm particularly, I love two back power. Just hitting that side, adding gaps to that side. I came from a fullback, background, right? Like all I
Yes.
knew was having a fullback in the backfield. So getting with some of these NFL teams, and they're like, nah, fullback. I'm like, where's the fullback? They're like, that's just like our second string back or maybe our third string tight end. But I love plays that utilize fullbacks. So two back power is my go-to. And then speaking of, a fullback, I love ISO plays, especially to the weak side. So people know it as like, I think Bob or Boss.
Mm.
There's different names for it, but I also love those plays as well. But yeah, gap scheme is what I'm picking. But my back's against the wall and I only get one.